Last week, a Russian missile struck a Polish grain silo near the Ukraine border, killing 2 people and sending shockwaves throughout Europe. The explosion not only destroyed the silo but also shattered the sense of security in a region already on edge. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, their flashing lights illuminating the devastation, as investigators scrambled to determine how such an incident could happen so close to NATO territory. For the first time since the war began, NATO territory was directly hit, forcing urgent emergency consultations among alliance members. The incident raised immediate fears of a direct military confrontation with Russia, as European leaders gathered to assess the rapidly evolving situation and reassure their citizens. The missile strike triggered Article 4 talks, a rarely used mechanism that brings NATO members together when one feels threatened. These discussions underscored just how easily the war in Ukraine could spill over borders, threatening the stability of the entire continent. Had Poland chosen to invoke Article 5, the alliance's collective defense clause, the entire NATO alliance, from the United States to Turkey, could have been drawn into open conflict. The world watched anxiously as leaders weighed their options, knowing the stakes had never been higher. While leaders ultimately called the strike a tragic error, the incident revealed just how razor-thin the line is between a regional war and a global catastrophe. The potential for escalation now hangs over every decision. For border communities in Poland and the Baltics, the anxiety is constant. Families live with the daily fear that the violence could cross over at any moment, their routines disrupted by the ever-present threat of war. Refugees and civilians alike are reminded that peace is fragile and easily shattered. The missile strike serves as a stark reminder. The Ukraine conflict is no longer a distant crisis. Its consequences are spreading across Europe, affecting millions and forcing governments to rethink their security and preparedness. Putin's willingness to escalate, whether by accident or by design, is now testing NATO's unity and resolve. Each new provocation raises the risk of miscalculation, making the situation even more volatile. The Kremlin's aggressive rhetoric and repeated threats are designed to intimidate, divide, and weaken the West's response. Russian officials use state media to amplify their message, hoping to sow discord among NATO allies. But this dangerous brinkmanship risks catastrophe on a global scale, pushing the world ever closer to a direct clash between nuclear powers. The stakes have never been higher, and the world is watching, hoping cooler heads will prevail before it's too late. In the wake of the devastating missile strike in Poland, which sent shockwaves across Europe and the world, the international community found itself at a crossroads. The images of damaged buildings and emergency teams racing to save lives underscored the urgent need for decisive action. Responding swiftly, President Trump announced sweeping new sanctions targeting Russia's energy and financial sectors, aiming to cripple the economic engines fueling the conflict. These measures were designed to send a clear message. The U.S. would not tolerate continued aggression. He issued a stern warning to the world. Any nation, whether a long-standing ally or a rival, that attempted to undermine efforts to isolate Moscow would face severe U.S. tariffs. The stakes were raised for all global players. Trump's message was unequivocal. Unity among Western nations is non-negotiable. He insisted that every loophole funding Russia's war machine must be closed, and that solidarity was the only path forward. Countries continuing to buy Russian oil or supplying critical technology would now face tariffs on their exports to the U.S., making it increasingly costly to do business with Moscow. Even NATO allies who were slow to cut their dependence on Russian energy were put on notice, as the administration demanded a unified front. Trump argued that any divisions within the West only serve to embolden Vladimir Putin. Every dollar flowing to Russia, he said, directly fuels more violence and destruction in Ukraine, prolonging the suffering. The administration's strategy was clear: apply universal economic pressure to force an end to the war, while avoiding direct military intervention. The hope was to squeeze Russia's economy until it could no longer sustain its campaign. This marks a significant escalation, not only targeting Russia itself, but also the vast global network of trade and finance that supports its economy. The ripple effects would be felt worldwide. The ultimate goal: a total financial blockade, forcing countries and corporations to make a stark choice between supporting Russia or maintaining access to the lucrative U.S. market. It's a risky, but, in the eyes of the administration, a necessary move, one intended to halt further aggression, restore stability, and ultimately pave the way for peace in a region desperate for resolution. Despite NATO's push to isolate Russia, some members, Hungary, Slovakia, and Turkey, still continue to buy Russian oil. Hungary and Slovakia rely heavily on old Soviet pipelines and can't easily switch suppliers without incurring huge costs. Prime Minister Orban argues that cutting Russian oil would devastate Hungary's economy, securing crucial exemptions from EU sanctions. Turkey, meanwhile, balances condemnation of Russia with increased oil purchases, using its strategic position as a mediator for leverage. These divisions strain the alliance as some members prioritize their national interests over collective security. Trump's ultimatum aims to force unity, making it costlier to keep buying Russian oil than to completely stop. The US is now targeting China and India, key economic lifelines for Russia, with tariffs. Both nations have ramped up purchases of Russian oil, providing Moscow with vital funds. The US has imposed tariffs on Chinese firms supplying dual-use tech to Russia's military. India faces threats of tariffs on its exports if it continues buying discounted Russian crude. The message: support Russia, and you risk losing access to the American market. This puts India and China in a bind, balancing energy needs against economic ties with the West. Critics warn tariffs could spark trade wars and raise prices, but supporters see them as essential leverage. The aim isn't to punish ordinary people, but to make supporting Russia's war effort economically untenable. It's a high-stakes game of economic pressure with global security on the line. The outcome will shape the future of the international order. NATO and the G7 are the twin pillars of the West's response to Russian aggression. NATO provides military deterrence, reinforcing its eastern flank and signaling readiness to defend every member. The G7 wields economic power, coordinating sanctions, freezing Russian assets, and supporting Ukraine financially. Their synergy is crucial. Military strength and economic pressure work best together. Unity is their greatest weapon. Any division is a weakness Putin can exploit. Trump's ultimatum is about closing ranks, demanding all members fully enforce sanctions. The alliance's security must outweigh individual economic interests. The Ukraine war is a reminder of why these institutions exist: to defend democracy and prevent catastrophic conflict. Their continued unity is essential for containing the crisis and securing peace. The world is watching to see if the West can hold together. Deterrence is a strategic concept, focused on preventing aggression by ensuring that the cost of any attack is unacceptably high for the aggressor. It is about creating a situation where the potential losses far outweigh any possible gains. NATO's existence has long served as a powerful deterrent against war in Europe, maintaining peace through strength. However, Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine has exposed significant cracks in that protective shield, challenging the alliance's unity and resolve. Putin gambled on a weak, divided response from the West, and for a moment, it seemed he might succeed in his bold gamble. In response, NATO is now actively rebuilding its deterrence capabilities. This involves boosting military readiness and making it unequivocally clear that any attack on a member nation will be met with a decisive and forceful response. The primary goal is to prevent Russia from escalating further and to send a strong warning to other authoritarian regimes against considering similar aggressive moves. If Russia succeeds in its aggressive actions, it sets a dangerous precedent for the world, encouraging other nations to pursue territorial expansion by force. A unified, credible response from the international community sends a clear message to potential aggressors. Redrawing borders by force will not be tolerated and will be met with collective resistance. Effective deterrence relies on both military and economic threats being real, credible, and enforceable. Sanctions and military readiness work hand in hand to maintain peace. Trump's push for absolute unity among NATO members and a total end to Russian oil purchases is aimed at restoring and reinforcing deterrence, ensuring that economic measures are as impactful as military ones. The overarching message is clear: any act of aggression will bring overwhelming and severe consequences, deterring potential aggressors from taking reckless actions. In this psychological battle, resolve and credibility are everything. The strength of deterrence lies in the unwavering commitment to defend peace and stability. The war in Ukraine is at a turning point, demanding resolve and strategy. First, Ukraine must be armed and Russia's economic lifelines cut. No more loopholes. Trump's ultimatum is a step toward a total economic blockade, now seen as essential. NATO and G7 unity must be absolute. Internal disputes only invite more aggression. Countries still reliant on Russian energy must accelerate their transition. The alliance's security must come before individual interests. The human cost is staggering. Keeping Ukraine's plight visible is vital to sustaining support. Beyond this war, The world must strengthen deterrence, international law, and energy independence. The choices made now will shape global security for generations. The time for decisive action is now.